All right. I would like to get started right now, and I'd like to introduce Ben Taatjes. He's the owner and CEO of Taatjes Financial Group. He's joining us on the call today. And Ben, let's just get things started here with respect to perhaps the topic here today. You've been in business for 20 years. What are some things that you've seen change in this business in the last 2 decades?
Yeah, Jared. Yeah, number one, I think what hasn't changed is probably the best question. I think it's been incredible watching the business unfold. I mean, 20 years is a long time. I can remember starting with just myself in this little office, and a lot of the things that I remember doing back then, I don't do anymore today. We learn from mistakes. We learn from experience, and I feel like what has stayed the same is relationships with clients, asking great questions. And I think what's really probably stayed the same is that the importance of understanding a client situation, asking the right questions to get at what their real problem is and how we can help them, that stayed the same. Investment options have changed and different things, but that has stayed constant the entire time. And that's kind of what today we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, again, we titled this 20 years of retirement planning wisdom wrapped up into a 3-question process. We got to this topic because you have mentioned in the past on our radio shows, podcasts, and us just chatting that you've seen people get off track where I don't want to say they overthink it, but maybe they get focused on the wrong things because they're not being asked the proper questions. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think one thing that our industry is very good at is confusing people. And most of that comes from asking the wrong questions. It is complex. And I never want to make it sound as if, what we're doing isn't complex and there's a lot of moving pieces to it. It is. But at the heart of what we should be doing is simplifying and solving problems, helping people understand. Yeah, I've got a heart of a teacher. I've been a Dave Ramsey fan since the very beginning. We're one of his endorsed local providers. But one of the things he says is have a heart of a teacher. And I take that to heart, I guess. I want people that we work with to understand. One of the things that I used to like to hear people say is, "Oh, Ben, we just trust you. We just trust you." And I used to think, "Oh, that's great. I want your trust." But that's not always good. We need a level of understanding. We need clients to understand through our education really what they have, the risk properties. They need to understand the overall financial picture. Yes, let us deal with the details. Let us get down into the minutia of the plan. But clients should understand and not only trust. We want to earn their trust over time, obviously, but we do have to have some level of understanding.
Yeah, exactly. And again, when it comes to this particular piece, stewardship, we all agree that at the heart level, retirees, they want to do this and they want to do it. They want to do it well. And again, what we're trying to get at here with this webinar is to give you a very simple plan, like Ben mentioned, just 3 questions. And again, I'm a fan of this particular information because if you answer these 3 questions, you're going to be on the right track. And this is kind of how you can take everything that Ben has learned in the last 20 years and apply it to your own life, your own retirement, and your own assets and ways to pass them on. Ben, just talk about that a little bit. Like talk about just even the heart behind the people that you've met. We have great clients here. We attract great clients, and really they have a heart of generosity, don't they?
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite things I do, is getting able to assist in the stewardship. I think our newest, and we've changed our mission statement a little bit, but really now it's more of we're here to assist clients and families to better steward the resources God's given them. And at the end of the day, if I can do that, I've done my job really, really well. So with that message comes, we do end up helping a lot of people that are generous, that are looking at their wealth as if it is not necessarily theirs. They look at things a little differently. We say, okay, I'm holding on loosely with what I have. It's a different mindset probably than what some financial professionals might talk about with, hey, with what you have. God owns it all. We start there. We say, okay, how am I best stewarding these assets, both now for ourselves, but also for future generations.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we're going to talk about three major questions here today, and that's where the bulk of the information on this webinar is going to come from. So Ben, let's just get started with question one of three. What is it? And let's dive in.
Yeah, it sounds almost too simple, guys, but I think we all need a starting point. And that starting point is, what am I stewarding? That's a very simple first question. But really what we're after there is not necessarily just, yeah, I've got a little money here in the 401k and I want you to help. We want help there. Usually it looks at a full capital allocation strategy. So we look across all asset classes. And the best example I have is, a client who comes to us and they've got a farm or a small business. They've got their 401k. They've got maybe a little bit of land. Maybe they've got gold, silver, whatever these assets might be. We need to know the total of everything they have, how it's titled, right? So we know how is the actual ownership title of each and everything that they have, but also, what are the risk properties to that asset. So it's not uncommon that I'll meet with somebody and they will be looking at their 401k as this nest egg over here. And they'll say, well, I've got this certain allocation that I want. I want 60-40 stocks, bonds, maybe a little gold, whatever it is. But they forget to look at, they've got this really, really safe asset over here in real estate or gold or land or a farm asset or business. We have to look at everything together in one picture. So it's usually that looks like a summary of a really, really detailed balance sheet that we put together, where we know all risk return properties. And this is the other piece, the goal of each of those assets that you're stewarding.
Do you find it, maybe, I don't want to say surprising, but like it seems like a very simple place to start, like literally, like, what do you have? Are you surprised as to sometimes how people come in and they maybe don't really have, I don't want to say a clue, but they don't have a really solid grasp as to what they actually own?
Yeah, it's not surprising anymore because I've seen it enough where it's like, yeah, I've got a little here, I got a little there, and all of a sudden we'll have this surprise asset pop up, right? And it doesn't surprise me anymore because people, as they've grown, they've got a little account over here and there and there. Things change over time. People lose track of why they invested in something in the beginning. They lose track of the goal of the asset. They lose track of even sometimes where the money is or that asset is. So no, it doesn't surprise me. I think we need to just, every time we meet with somebody, go down to verifying every asset, how it's titled. And by the way, guys, if you have that document or that balance sheet that we create, you're well on your way to a great meeting with an attorney to really set up an estate plan or wealth transfer plan. So we use a software called eMoney. It allows us to link in out assets from other sources. So if somebody's working with us today and we manage a portion of their account, but yet they have money at their 401k because they still work at the company, we're able to network all that together to see the full picture. And it's not uncommon. We meet with clients and we're giving them help on those assets as well, just to, again, provide education and support across their entire financial picture.
You said how one of the main reasons you want to establish what are you stewarding, what do you own, is to give it a goal and also establish some risk and return properties. Talk about, again, you already mentioned that, but expound upon that just a little bit and maybe let that flow into what question number two is.
Well, yeah, Jared, I think many times there's questions beneath the question, right? So yes, it is a simple 3-step question process, but underneath this question is more developed questions as well. So in this case, I'll say, well, what are we actually stewarding? Okay, so that's the big question. But I want to get a little more detailed then and say, again, have you developed specific goals for each of those assets? Another one would be, would you be okay if you took the least amount of risk possible, but you were able to accomplish all of your financial goals, right? Um, I ask questions like, do you have regrets with your personal finances? It's a great way to get down to, what somebody has done wrong in the past, things they wish they'd done differently, get at the psychology of how we feel about our money or our wealth as well. So, there's a ton of very detailed questions that we'll get into in those discussions. But really at the heart of all of that is I want every client to understand everything that they're stewarding, right? And have a goal specifically for each asset, right? So that's where we always start.
Yeah. Do you anything else you want to talk about when it comes to what are you stewarding, or should we move on to question number two?
I think probably the question that doesn't get talked about enough on each of these that I've found is this last one. Do you and your spouse understand the overall financial picture? And have you discussed the long-term goals for your wealth? And I think what I've found is there's oftentimes a money spouse and a non-money spouse, if you will. And I'm okay if not both spouses are at every single meeting all the time. I get it. A financial professional like myself, we can get not boring meetings, but sometimes people are like, yeah, I just don't want to go see that person. I think it's extremely important that both husband and wife, regardless of who's the financial mind of the couple, are at most of our meetings. And a primary reason for that is I've been alongside families when you go through a loss and when you see, husband passed away and he was always the financial one. Now I've got to rebuild trust with wife, and I've got to rebuild education. I've got to help again develop that level of trust in a time when that's the last thing you want to do. So again, I think it's important that at least some of those meetings, I've got both husband and wife, both the financial and non-financial spouse, depending on which one is in your family, but more involvement and more communication between spouses on what you're stewarding is very, very important.
Yeah. So the first question is, what are you stewarding? Obviously, there's some sub questions under that, but the whole idea with that particular question is to really get a firm foundation as to what it is that you are stewarding, what you own, and also getting down on paper, what do you want to do with that money, making sure everybody's on the same page. And I think that's a really important place to start. Ben, what's question number two?
Well, second question is, how much is enough now and in the future? Okay. So what I'm really after there is developing, if the first question was, what am I stewarding? I'm trying to develop a capital allocation plan. The second question is, how much is enough now and in the future? And what I'm trying to build there is an income plan. And something I think too many people don't fully understand is just how important consistent regular income is for people, especially coming into retirement. Many times people have a hard time transitioning from earning that regular paycheck, and then it's gone and they're trying to then dip into their retirement savings. Part of our work is to help them even just mentally understand the difference between wealth and income. So if everything we've been talked about so far in capital allocation, what do I steward? That's all the wealth, right? Once it's money on a piece of paper and you can see a statement, that's more considered, this is the wealth. This is what I've been saving. I want to make sure that each client has specific regular income coming in retirement. So that involves income sources from really all different areas.
Well, a couple of things I want to ask you about, but one has to do with, again, really breaking down this idea of wealth versus income. You spend an entire chapter in your book Repurpose just talking about that specifically, but also too, I want to talk about this question really gets down to the heart, and then really leads well into the third question, which we're not going to get to yet. But you have to really kind of, I don't want to say put some boundaries, but put some, kind of put some boundaries on it. Where do you want to start with this plethora of questions here?
Well, you gave me like three, but I think the boundaries thing is worth talking about, Jared. And when I say how much is enough, sometimes people hear me say that, and it's like, are you trying to set a budget for me? Are you trying to budget? I've had a budget my entire life because financial people said, you gotta save more. You've got to be able to figure out everything that's coming in, and then there's something left over, right? Versus what's coming in, what's being spent, and I should be saving that for the future. And this is kind of just the opposite for retirees. I look at the boundaries, if you will, the budget around some a retiree as being giving them more opportunity to spend and give, right? One of the hardest money concepts for people to realize is that if you've been saving your entire life, you have to transition into more of a somebody who's no longer saving. Many people that I work with have a hard time with that, Jared, because what happens is they're conditioned, they've seen their parents save, they have been a saver, they've always live on less than what they that comes in. That's why they're successful. Now they're actually being moved into an income, really where they're using that wealth to create the income. And I think that's something that too many people don't fully understand. In fact, I would say if there's any problem I see with clients is I don't think they fully understand how much that they can spend, how much that they can give to charity, because that is really on us to help them see the long term of what's coming in regularly from Social Security and other assets, what portfolio income that we've designed, and they don't fully understand that there will be a bunch left. And if that's their goal, that's okay. But many of them, it's not their goal. So that means we're doing something wrong.
Yeah. And again, it gets down to that heart level where, people have saved and they've created a sizable nest egg so they can retire. They can take work out of the life equation, so to speak. And it should be liberating. It should be freeing. And as you mentioned, kind of one of those worst case scenarios is where somebody indeed has enough and then their quality of life goes down because of almost the mental, the mental side, the emotional side of now trying to turn from a saver into a spender. They can't make that chasm, and their quality of life essentially goes down, and they're more worried about their money than ever. And that's what we're trying to eliminate here.
Yeah, if you're not, I've found that if I don't put those boundaries around, like, here's how much we're going to spend, here's how much, and by the way, the client comes up with that. It's like, okay, paint the picture of your ideal retirement. What is it going to take now and in the future? We'll add inflation and we'll do all of our planning for you. But ultimately, it's okay, here's what we want our life to look like. It's really my job to then show them and get them comfortable with the income, right? And what usually happens is when we put that boundary around them, they actually get close to that boundary. We've talked about this before. There's a study done, and we talked about on the podcast, but there's a study done on kids in playgrounds, and they found that when there was no fence or boundary around the playground, the kids would huddle up near the play equipment in the center. They would all kind of stay gathered together in the center, right? But once the boundary was created and there was a fence around the playground, kids would feel more free to go towards the edges of that. That's kind of what we're doing here. We've created a budget so people do go outside of what they normally found was their comfort level. Inside this their little boundary, we expand it so they can see, oh, I can start to give to, more to charity. I can take the trip that I never thought I should. Many of you that have met with me in the past, you'll say things like, Ben's always trying to get me to spend my money. And I guess it's not that I'm pushing you to spend your money. It's I want to make sure you feel comfortable doing that, because the last thing I want to do is get to that end of life scenario and have somebody say, because we do tend to, if there's anything that we regret, it's almost always the thing we did not do. It's rarely do I hear. I've had the opportunity, to walk with clients towards the end of their lives. I've been doing this a long time. And I remember hearing that conversation many times, like, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that. It's not ever, I wish I hadn't done this or that. So we're trying to make sure that with a well-designed, confident income plan, clients expand to those boundaries, right? And they do more while they can enjoy doing it.
Yeah, it's kind of it's not kind of, it is a very much a win-win scenario, but also it does speak to that heart level, because if you don't have those boundaries, fear can come into play. I think, we'd all agree one of the biggest fears you have in retirement, besides, a health crisis or something like that, would be running out of money. I mean, we hear that all the time, and That's the reason why the very first question retirement planners typically get is how much do I need so I don't run out, type of thing. But when you give them a clear plan to say this is how much you need, it's all been allocated. You can see it here on paper. We have the tools to assess this and map it out for you. Then instead of having fear and scarcity, you have freedom and liberation. And that's the whole process in life that we're trying to encourage people to walk into.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to focusing more on your income. I look at if you look at money, and there's two sides to the coin. There's the wealth side and the income side. Look at money that way. So, okay, typically what I've found is wealth can actually drive more discontentment. It can drive more fear. It can drive more, of just concern versus income. I've never seen anybody have a hard time spending their Social Security check. People that are fortunate to have a pension payment, they don't care about the pension guarantee fund. They don't care what's in the fund. They don't. What they care about is the useful side of money, which is income, because it comes consistently regular and they're able to spend that. It's the easiest money people can spend. It's different when you have to go and call and ask permission to get money from an account or feel as if you're withdrawing from a wealth type situation. So again, we want to make sure it's regular, consistent. If I look at, this is getting down to the heart level and maybe almost to spiritual for today's call, but I think sometimes, certainly in our culture today, we end up putting the wealth side of the equation almost on a pedestal. It becomes a god. It becomes a replacement of where we should find our value of what's most important. So I think as just a cautionary tale, money, when you look at it as the means. Look at it as the thing that will allow you to do more, experience more, not necessarily, never as the end. It should always be the means. It should never be the end goal.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And again, that's why I really like this question, because it does really put your heart posture in the spotlight, so to speak. But also, this question is a great segue from the first question. So once we have a really solid idea as to what it is that we are stewarding, we understand the risk involved, and is it more of safe investments, not so safe, whatever, however you want to categorize those, and then coming up with an income plan based on those assets. Again, it's a great flow chart in really developing this particular plan.
It is, Jared, and there's the minutia again, the background behind this is we're going to look at each of those assets and decide, what's the best from an income tax standpoint, income to come in and when, right? We're looking at maximizing tax brackets. We're looking at all of these things behind the scenes. But ultimately, it boils down to, from a client perspective, is what do I have, right? What am I stewarding? How much is enough for me to spend now and in the future, right? And then you kind of drill that down first and foremost.
Yeah. So again, the first question is, what is it that you're stewarding? Second question is, how much is enough for you and in the future? Ben, what's the third question?
Well, before I get to that, I kind of want to highlight a couple sub questions underneath there too, because I want to get you guys thinking, like, what would a meeting with us look like if you went through that? And what I love to do is kind of, sub question it, drill down a little further at this. So one of the things I love to ask people is, do you know where your income's coming from each month? Is it guaranteed in the same time each month? Where most people are used to, unless you're self-employed, of course, we've got some volatility in our income, but a lot of people are used to regular, consistent money coming in at the same time. So I think that's important. Another one is, in the last month, what was something enjoyable your income allowed you to do? So again, that gets you thinking more, oh yeah, what has provided me more joy, what has provided me more use has been income. So you can start thinking about, yeah, I was able to take that trip or bless somebody with a gift or whatever that is through the income that I had. And then that last one, I'll go to just one more here. I've got several, but do you and your spouse discuss shared long-term financial goals and align on your spending? I love that one, because if I haven't taken the full hour of our meeting, I do now, right? So most of our meetings end up being an hour, and if I ask that question, I know it's going to probably run long, so I better have a little freedom in my schedule, because too many times we don't talk about our money enough with our spouses. It's like this taboo thing. It's like we'll talk about all these other things, but not our money. And there's a reason. I think the Bible talks about money over 2,300 times, because it can cause such a wedge in couples. That's why most people actually get divorced, is it comes down many times to financial things. Many of it could be solved if we just talked about it a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it's a great conversation starter. And so with any of these three major questions, there's a lot of, as you mentioned, Ben, sub questions that get kind of spread out in there. And we're going to give you an opportunity here at the end for you to have a free download where you can really download all of the questions in greater detail here at the end. What's question number 3?
Well, again, sounds simple, but what do you do with the rest? One of the things that I've noticed with most of our clients we deal with is that if we look at what they have and we find out what's enough for them on a regular income, what they're going to be able to use, there's almost always something left over. Now, that's not for everybody. I mean, there are people out there really struggling just to make ends meet. But for most of our clients, they tend to be highly successful. They tend to, again, spend less than they make. At the end of the day, there's almost always something left over. And really that question drills at, what do we do with it? Right? How much is going to be left over? We can tend to kind of extrapolate that number and then start to look at, what do you do with it? And really there's only 3 things you can do with it, guys. There's only 3 things. You're either going to pay it in taxes, so estate taxes. The money's going to go to your heirs, like family members or other heirs, or it's going to go to charity. And there's really no other use for the money. So we can develop a plan. I yet to have somebody come into my office and say, well, I'm really just focused on getting that money sent to the government someday. That has never happened. I would love to pay it in estate tax somehow. So if you're a wealthy person and you're able to plan accordingly right now, the good news is there's a lot of things going on that allow us to pass a lot of wealth to the next generation. But really we're trying to decide, what do we do with the rest?
I think a lot of people, when you pose that question, their mind immediately goes to a will, an estate plan, and there's nothing inherently wrong with either one of those routes. But we believe that there's a little bit of maybe a better path that people could take. Talk about that.
Yeah, so what we're going to develop is a wealth transfer plan. So it's going to look a little bit different. The goals will be slightly different. Again, I'm not an estate planning attorney. We work with them all the time. I'm not a CPA. We work with them all the time. But if our first thing was a capital asset allocation plan, that was step 1. Then it was an income plan. Now we're on to a wealth transfer plan, which is, what do I do with the rest? And what makes it different is that many times a estate plan is kind of, once you're gone, it begins. Like you set everything in motion so that when you pass away, things go where you want them to go. And that's part of a wealth transfer plan. But the heart of a wealth transfer plan really comes into beginning that work now, right? Both preparing the next steward, which is highly important, but also begin utilizing the gifts, right, that you've been given, those financial resources, to get those moved to charity or children way before you pass away.
Yeah. And again, that's one of the major differentiators, is that it doesn't wait. You begin this process now. You mentioned preparing the next steward. You also, we've talked about a podcast, even just this week, where we're talking about the differences between these two particular plans. One tends to be a little bit more focused on tax efficiency. They're both focused on tax efficiency, but really it's more focused on the donor more than the recipient. Talk about how that posture, the heart behind the plan, is a little bit different between the two.
Yeah, I think starting with the realization again, that somebody else is going to have what you have is very important. So when you think through that your children likely, or charity, but will have those assets when you're gone, they need to be prepared for that. So one of the things, there's this a thing called the wisdom principle, which I love, and I got it through some of my CKA training with the Kingdom Advisors. It says never pass wealth without having passed wisdom first, right? Wisdom may create wealth, but wealth never creates wisdom. So the importance there is preparing the next steward. So yes, we want to do it the most tax efficient way. Yes, we want to make sure that you're paying the least amount of tax and expenses possible, but that's almost secondary to making sure that your heirs are prepared, that they're ready to receive that wealth. Which means, if, and some people are like, well, I just haven't done enough. There's no way I can begin there. And I'm with you. Believe me, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been a dad for 18 years. And my daughter's leaving for college in a few months. And I'm trying to cram as much as I can in right now because I'm like, did I do enough to prepare her for that? It's tough, but I think there's always steps we can take to help prepare the next steward of the assets that you have. And I think an enjoyable part of my work is helping families decide, how much and when for each of their children, how much and when. So you look at each child and charity, you say, how much should go there? With all of this, what's left over, how much and when. And most of the time, the answer is not all of it when I die, right? There should be something started sooner.
Yeah, I think everybody wins when you can start that. I want to say like the unloading, but the deaccumulation process early, because not only do you win because you're getting a chance to see the impact that you helped create, but you get a chance to come alongside the beneficiary and help them or that person or that child or that charity and help them steward it. Because like you said, just handing somebody a check doesn't necessarily pass along wisdom. And that's a major piece of what we believe in, because there's a huge difference between inheritance and legacy. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's something that came about early in my career. I remember hearing a lot of, it usually was people trying to push life insurance, and they would do these events. They'd say, it's a legacy seminar. We're going to talk about legacy. We're talking about legacy. And really what they were talking about was inheritance. It had nothing to do with legacy. I look at legacy as the lasting impact on your family. Inheritance is the money your kids will spend, right? Very, very different things. You never want to focus too much on the inheritance and not enough on the legacy side, right? The wisdom. So preparing them for that wealth that may come their way. So there's definitely a difference there, Jared. I think there's something to be said about giving an inheritance to children and helping, your family lineage and all those things. But the reality of it is, if you haven't prepared them, you can do more harm than good. And one of the reasons I love seeing parents build into their plan a regular gifting or matching. And we've got a client who kind of has created his own 401k, if you will, with his kids. Like, hey, you put money away and I'm going to be matching that. If you're able to save, we're going to match that. I have another client. This is not uncommon in the business, where we'll have more of incentive trusts or legacy trusts, or you say, hey, when you have that first time home purchase, within certain parameters, so much money is going to go in to help you get a down payment. But here's what has to happen first. Here's some things that you have to do. You have to have a job. You have to have these things. So it's not uncommon that parents feel as if their kids aren't doing enough, right? And oh man, they're not contributing as much as we have, and I'm trying to make their life better, and we're trying to educate them to help them do that. And there's many ways, but again, the key point there is never pass along the wealth without passing along the wisdom first.
I love, again, how these questions kind of they tier and segue nicely into the next question. I would have to venture to guess somebody on this call is thinking, you want me to start deaccumulating now and not waiting, 10 or 20 years or 30 years when I die? I don't want to be giving away my money. Ben, talk about that a little bit. Like, what's the difference between your money and their money? And again, it goes back to answering the second question first, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think first, as I open the call with, realize that it's all God's money. We're stewarding. There's a certain amount of it that you will need, and it's you've saved it and you've built this up so that you can use it in your lifetime. But what I'm looking at is if we have a comfortable and defined boundary and income plan for a client, they should feel very comfortable with what we know will be left over, beginning to do some of that gifting now, whether that be through 529 plans or incentive gifts or just outright gifts that we can begin to pass that wealth along. But I will say, Jared, it's really hard to do that if you're not really comfortable with question number 2, right? Which says, do I have enough for my needs going forward? And I think that's why it's so important. We first see, what do you have? Then it's, what do I need? Then finally, right, what do we do with the rest? Because if you try to do that in any other order, it doesn't work, because clients need to know, right? They need to see that they are covered, that they have enough, and that allows them to then be able to do that gifting. And sometimes it's charitable gifting, Jared. Sometimes seeing that their income needs are there and they're met throughout their life, it allows them to not just wait until death to give whatever's left over to charity. By the way, that's really not a gift. If you hold on to everything that you have because you need it, and then you die, and then it all goes to charity, in my mind, that doesn't sound like a gift that you're making. It sounds like a gift that your kids have made, kind of, because they could have used that money, but you can't, right? A dead person can't give away money. So I would rather, from a tax efficiency standpoint, be giving while I'm living. From an enjoyment standpoint, I'd rather be giving while I'm living, but also just from the truth, like, I can't really do that after I'm gone, because I can't make that gift. There's really no sacrifice at all to a gift when I don't need something.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a visual person, so I think of the fence analogy with the playground that you mentioned earlier, where I've got my nest egg, right, and then I've got this fence that only encompasses a small piece of it, and you've established this is all that I need. This is a viable income plan, that all that I need. If you hold on to the rest till death, to your point, that can actually come off seeming a little bit, I don't want to say it, but it can come off maybe a little bit selfish, because I don't need it. I know I don't need it. I will never use it, but yet I'm still going to hold on to it until I die. Meanwhile, my heirs, family and charity could utilize this right now. Again, I don't want to sound harsh, but like when you frame it up like that, it does land a little bit differently than just like everybody gets theirs, when I pass along.
Yeah, and most Jared, I'll tell you this, statistically speaking, it's about age 64. It's the average inheritance in the United States today. 64 is when you receive your inheritance. Most of the time, in fact, I can say almost every time I've had those conversations with clients later on in life, the kids that are 64 are like, yeah, I don't really need the money now. I could have used it in my 30s or 40s.
Needed it 20 years ago.
Yeah, I could have used it then. And by the way, I wish mom and dad had just used that money with us. Why didn't we travel more? Why didn't we see more? Why didn't we do more together with that, versus here's a pile of money when I don't even need it, or nearly to the extent that I did before. So again, in order to help them not have that regret someday, or see them like, oh, now we get this pile of money. I would rather see people do that sooner rather than later. It helps prepare the next steward, but it also is getting the next steward the resources when they're most needed. So whether it be kids or charity, most of the time, it's better to start that giving, certainly while you're living.
I want to start landing this plane here in the next, 3 to 5 minutes. So Ben, just talk about kind of the family dynamics. I guarantee you there's people on this call, they've got kids. Again, we're encouraging them to think about starting to give away some of those assets now. I've got 4 kids. They're all crazy different. Talk about just kind of the dynamic of family planning of kids. We've used a term or a statement on the show before, where fair doesn't always mean equal. Talk about that for just a couple of minutes.
Well, it's a tough one. And again, if I want my meeting to go extra long, I'll ask that question. And the question would be, if your children today received your wealth, what would be the best or worst possible outcome? Get picturing them getting the wealth now. And it's not uncommon that it'll be, well, you know, child number one, and usually it's number one, but number one and two, you know, I think they'd be fine. But boy, my youngest, boy, this would not be good because of this and this and that reason, right? And they start to walk through the pros and cons of each child and what we get them starting on, tell me some real positive, some really great things about your kids, but also there's things that it may not be a good idea to hand too much money to somebody all at once, whether or not it changes their motivation for the future. Maybe there's a host of reasons why you have to be very careful. You love your kids uniquely. I would be okay treating them uniquely when it comes to how, at least when, maybe not how much. A lot of people get stuck on that one. It's like, well, each kid's going to get the same amount. But certainly the timing, right? So maybe it's the when is changed for some of them. Maybe it's things put in the plan to allow for some learning money over time. A lot of attorneys will do that, right? We'll section it out over time. There's a ton of things that need to happen in the planning to make sure that happens. And we're about just talking about it, just get you thinking, you know, what is the best and worst possible outcome should our kids inherit the wealth that we're stewarding now. And it's not uncommon, Jared, that parents will treat their kids again uniquely in that situation.
Yeah. Again, I want to wrap this up here in the next minute or two, and allow for some little Q&A. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat, by the way. If you have any questions, concerns, want to dive a little bit deeper into some of these concepts. So Ben, just maybe what's one more example question you'd ask somebody to kind of get to the heart level of this question? What do you do with the rest?
Well, I'll add the one we've been ending with on each of these is, do you have a planned charitable giving plan? And do you and your spouse align on what role charity plays in that plan? Again, getting down to that tough decision, and it's not uncommon that we'll have spouses kind of look at that a little bit differently. More common is that they've never talked about it. It's like the money one kind of gives the money away. And guys, I'm guilty of this too. You know, my wife, it may not surprise you, I'm our financial one. But our wife, my wife and I have in the last few years started to come together more on who we're going to support and how we're going to support them with our charities. So again, I just think communication is so important. I'm learning that as I go. I've been married as of yesterday 24 years, and man, if there's something I've messed up, it's communication, and I think that's been a key around the financial world, and what's really caused, I would say, more headaches, more problems for clients, more issues with spouses, is not enough communication. That's our job. We're here to ask the right questions. We're here, like you heard today, to ask the questions that get you thinking about your money more, about how you can best steward both your time, talent, and yes, treasure to the best of your ability. So that's what we're about, is helping you communicate with us, asking the right questions so we get at really what your goal is, where we can plug in and help. And that's, I think, going back to the beginning of the call, Jared, if anything's changed in the work I do, we've come up with a whole lot better questions, a whole lot better ways to communicate with clients to get at, you know, really where we can help them. You know, almost every business is about problem solving in some way. Almost everybody has a problem where their situation is either unorganized, or there's a problem where they can't figure out how much income they're going to have, the most tax efficiency, all these things. There almost always comes to a problem that we can solve, but we have to ask the right questions to figure out what those problems are.
Yeah, I love it. I think that this is a really important topic, and I love how these questions, like you said at the beginning, are very, very simple, easy to follow along. They play off of each other. They segue nicely from one to the other. And if you can answer these questions in detail, they can really, really help hone in on what you're trying to do and best steward not only your time, your talent, but also your resources as well. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please use the chat feature. We're going to wrap this up here in about 5 minutes, but I do want to give you just a way that you can go just a little bit deeper. There's a URL on your screen right now. It's taatjesfinancial.com/next dash steps. All right. taatjesfinancial.com/next dash steps. If you go to that URL, you're going to see a page that looks just like this. And we're going to have 3 very simple options for you. There is a free download that you can click on. No name, no email, no nothing, right? Like you just go in there, click download, and you can get a 2-page white paper, which maps out in greater detail not only these 3 questions, but also all the sub questions that Ben mentioned on the webinar here today, but also many questions that he didn't mention and questions that he has used in meetings over the course of years. So if you want to get some more information, you want to have a downloadable, something you can print off, refer back to, rather than rewatching this webinar, that's a really, really great resource for you to use. Again, go to taatjesfinancial.com/next steps, and then you can click on that download. If you want to go just a little bit deeper, maybe you're a client of ours, maybe you're not, and you just want to dip your toe in the water. Kendra Petersons, who's one of our financial advisors here, she is so good at helping families orient their life and their money. We blocked off some time on her schedule, little 15-minute increments. If you just want to have a simple conversation with her, click on book call, and you can get on her schedule. We blocked off some time here in the next week or so where you can have a one-on-one conversation with Kendra. And if you want to have a full meeting and really dive into the depths of retirement planning and your stewardship plan, just click on request a meeting or get started there on that 3rd option. And that will take you to a link where you can then send us an email, and we will reach out to you and make sure that you get on our schedule. So this is one really very simple way that you can take the next step and get a little bit more information, a little more insight, and make sure that you have your retirement stewardship plan locked and loaded in place. I'm going to give everybody just maybe another moment or 2 here to chime into the chat. Ben says, Vicky Dreyer here said, what did you mean by incentive giving? Ben, can you chime in there and answer that question?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Vicky. And yeah, I think it can look different for different clients, but usually there's something that we would like to see more of from our kids. So one of the things that a lot of people are like, yeah, kids don't save today like they used to. And yeah, maybe there's a 401k plan which has a match, but we want to take that a step further and say, we're going to match your money that you put into your 401k. But we're going to like give you money, right, to match kind of your saving. So we'll come alongside you and say, we see you doing whatever that activity is that we're trying to see more of, and reassure and kind of reaffirm them with some financial amount. So I think there can be very formal in nature, an incentive trust. Like actually, I'm working with a client right now who's doing that. We have an incentive trust that we're building, which you can make the requirements any way you want to, as far as the parameters around that, or it can be very loose. I have another client who just says, hey, let me know if my kid's putting money into the account that we've set up for them with you guys, because I'm going to match that every year. And it's not a necessarily tax advantage thing. It's just something that they're trying to do to help, again, kind of the thought of saving now, because that's why they were so successful. The one individual for sure I'm talking about didn't in fact, both of them were first, they're first wealth family. They didn't have generational wealth themselves. They earned it. And they're like, one thing that helped me grow my net worth over time was saving. So we want to kind of affirm that when our kids are saving. So we built some things into their plan that allow for their kids to see kind of a doubling of their money when it's invested. So.
Great question, Vicky. We appreciate that. Last call for any questions. If you have any further questions for Ben, feel free just to use the next 30 seconds, throw those in the chat. Again, if you need more help, want to take this to the next level, want that free download, again, go to taatjesfinancial.com/next-steps. I put the link in the chat. Just go there. Again, that download will give you a lot more information, and will give you all the questions laid out in bullet point form, along with all the sub questions. Because again, the truth is that it is a very simple process, but there's a lot of caveats and a lot of details that we need to get to and help you establish on this journey to really coming up with your retirement stewardship plan. Let's see here. We'll give you everybody maybe one more minute. Ben, any final remarks here as we wrap up this webinar?
Yeah, Jared, I just think in stewardship, this discussion comes up a lot, and Jared, I've been pushed on this a little bit, certainly with people. It's like, oh, it's just for wealthy, or it's just for, people that have a lot, and or they think that somebody with a lot of wealth can't be a good steward, or maybe they've got so much, so they must not be a good steward because it looks like they've got two homes or they've got different things. And I always like to just remind people, I think real stewardship is less about what you have and about how you look at what it is that you do have, right? And how you come across. I've seen some of the most generous, great stewards of money be some of the wealthiest people that I deal with. But I've also seen some extremely generous and great stewards that I deal with that have less than others might have. So ultimately, it comes down to how you look at what you have. If you understand who owns it and you're doing the best with what you've gotten, our kind of my go-to when I explain what the 3 T's are on your shirt there, the time, talent, treasure that we talk about all the time. It comes from a biblical, really a biblical belief. I mean, it's right there in Matthew where, it tells the story. They tell the story, the parable of the 3 servants that are leaving, or that are kept back to kind of watch over their master's stuff when he's gone. And to one he gives 5 talents, the other gives 2, and the other one is 1. And when he returns from being gone for a time, he asks each of them for an accounting. What did you do with what I gave you? And the guy that he'd given 5, he doubled it to 10. And the master says, good job. You've done exactly what I wanted you to do. You did the best of what you've given. The second guy, who was given 2, doubled it, and he gave him the exact same answer. That's a key thing people don't hear in that parable, is that the guy that was given the most and the second most both did the same with what they had gotten, with their masters, what they were stewarding. And they got the exact same answer word for word in like every single biblical translation. It's the same answer. Only the last person, who was given the least but did nothing with it, right? He was the one that was told, kind of, get out of here, you wicked and slothful servant. I don't want anything to do with you. The other 2 got everything. So again, I just think it's so important that whether or not you've been given a lot or a little, right? Time, talent, and treasure, you do the most what you've been given.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, because the truth is we're all stewarding our resources. We're doing that right now. That's not happening at retirement. It's happening right now, and we're all part of that. So I think that's a really good point. This is not just for the highly affluent and for the people who have just insane amounts of excess. This is for everybody. And as you mentioned, and as we mentioned too, your treasure is only one form of stewardship. That's just only one piece of the puzzle. We all have, as long as we're breathing here on planet Earth, we have time left to steward that time wisely and to make the most of this life. So I deeply connect to this conversation. I think it's phenomenal. And so I love the content here today. Ben, thank you for your expertise and your heart behind this. We are going to land this plane now. If there's no further questions, again, if you want to take the next step, I can't encourage you more to go to taatjesfinancial.com/next steps. Again, the URL is pasted there in the chat. Download the free downloadable. You'll have a full notes on this particular webinar in greater detail. And if you want to chat more, again, we do offer a 15-minute call with Kendra, or a full-blown meeting in our office, or via Zoom if you're located elsewhere around the area.